Women's Month is celebrated in August on an annual basis with the aim of paying tribute to the more than 20,000 women who marched to the union buildings to protest against the extended pass laws in 1956. This year, Women's Month is being celebrated under the theme Generation Equality, Realizing Women's Rights for an Equal Future. The concept of generation equality is a global campaign and links South Africa to global efforts that are aimed at achieving gender equality by year 2030. Over the years, the spotlight has been focused on young girls and women and their rights to accessing good quality health care, and doing so without feeling like their rights are compromised in any shape or form. Let's face it, in most settings, often than not, young girls learn about issues that are around sexual health by virtue of being in a relationship with the opposite sex, talking to their peers and their friends, and sometimes by talking to public health educators. As a country, it is imperative for us to raise the urgency and the importance of prioritizing young women, highlighting and providing for their rights, especially where sexual reproductive health is concerned. In addition to highlighting the priority of these services, it is also equally important to make sure that young women have access to these very said services. Gender equality and access to quality health services can't be separated. Research actually goes to show that they rely on each other. Furthermore, as a society, we need to be very cognizant of the fact that the adolescent phase is a decisive period for girls, and that what transpires during these teenage years can actually shape the direction that the girl's life can take. Government, in partnership with other organizations, is truly committed to providing young people, especially young women, with the healthcare services that they so desperately require. To discuss this further and place a spotlight on the link between quality health services and gender equality, the barriers to access, programs available to young women, especially young girls, I'm joined by phenomenal women who are a trove of knowledge on the subject matter. My name is Janet Mulekwa. Joining me today, I have Ms. Fina Kodisang, who is the Chief Executive Officer for Soul City Institute. Next to Ms. Fina, we have Dr. Tato Chidarikire, who is representing the National Department of Health. We are then joined by Dr. Linda Ngube Nkomo, who is the Chief Executive Officer for loveLife. Of course, it would not be a discussion about young people if we left young people out. I'm joined by Ratabile Lesofe, who is a loveLife groundbreaker. Ladies, welcome and happy Women's Month.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's start the conversation with you, Dr. Chidarikire. What is sexual reproductive health, and how does sexual reproductive health services tie in with gender equality?
Right. Thank you very much. So, sexual reproductive health is a state of complete physical, mental, as well as health well-being. Not just the absence of disease per se, but in a way, all matters relating to well-being in terms of sexual reproductive health. And access to SRH in itself actually supports particularly young people in terms of empowerment to make informed decisions and for self-care. And this again includes gender inequality and how to deal with matters of self-care in itself.
So, Dr. Linda, Dr. Chidarikire just touched on making informed decisions, which then sort of indicates that access to information is equally as important as access to these services. What's your take on that?
I think it's very difficult to make an informed decision without having the information. So it is important that we give young people as much information in as many areas where we can get young people as possible. And I think one of the most important but neglected areas where information should be shared is actually in the home. We've outsourced the sharing of information around sexual rights and reproductive health to government, to schools, to friends, to NGOs like us, when actually the person that could do the most informing with really the well-being of the young person at heart. It's the person at home, it's the adult at home. You know, in our African culture, we had our aunties that taught us around, you know, what it meant to be a young woman, about self-care, around be careful, you know, if you're wanting to sleep with a boy, make sure, at that time they didn't know much about HIV/AIDS, but they definitely knew about pregnancy, so make sure you're on the pill and so on. So information is going to be very important, but it's also important to now start a narrative that says, what are you teaching your children, as opposed to government should do this, civil society should do this, and so on.
Great stuff. And then Ms. Fina, in terms of taking this back to the home, we obviously have an ideal situation of what should be happening where sexual reproductive health is concerned. But what is our lived reality as a country where this matter is concerned?
So before I answer, can I just reflect on what my two colleagues have said? It's interesting that we leave out the rights component, right? So Department of Health says sexual reproductive health, but there's a right component. So young people have a right, you know, to body autonomy, a right to decide when and how, you know, they access services, and a right to access those services. So we must not forget an element of rights, and of course rights goes with responsibility. So in programs we need to teach the responsibility that young women have, but they have a right, and we forget always to remind them that they have that right. But also it's interesting what Linda says, your aunties will teach you, will tell you, you know, don't sleep with boys. And the language is important because I can sleep with a boy without having sex with a boy. So if you want me not to engage in sex, don't tell me not to sleep with boys, but teach me what sex is and what the dangers of having sex unprotected or prematurely are. You know, because if you say sleep, they'll say, the young women are very brave. They'll tell you, okay, yeah, we don't sleep with them. We have sex with them. So the language is also important, right? And I think that's the lived experience that young people have. They are taught confusing messages. At home, we tone it down. We say, sleeping with boys is dangerous. And they choose not to sleep with them. They have sex and they have babies. And no one told them. So we need to change the language, but also the lived experience is that young people are told, we advertise everywhere that go to a clinic, you'll get these services. They get there, the services are not provided. They get there, a nurse who's now playing a role of a mother, you know, because probably she has daughters herself and she's seeing you as a daughter, would say, no, you are too young to have sex. You are too young to use contraceptives. So denying that right and that access. You know, so we need to balance these things. And I know it comes from a moral background that we have as a country where we are 80% Christians. Of course, we want a holy nation, you know, but it doesn't translate, right?
Absolutely. And Tabitha, if I can bring you into the conversation where young people are concerned, how do they actually deal with what Ms. Fina has just touched on now? Going to a clinic, you have to speak to a nurse who goes to the same church as your mom, for example. How do young people then actually open up and get the services that they need? And what would be the ideal type of setup for young people to actually take up these services?
Okay, well, I would say it's quite difficult for like the youth to be able to access those services because they feel judged. I also had that experience. So I was in high school, I was doing grade 11, and our local clinic was based near our school. So after school, my friends and I decided to go to the clinic to just go check out like different prevention methods that we can use. So we were in our school uniform. So when we got there, the security guards was like, what are you guys doing here? And we told them, no, we're just here to like access information about different prevention methods. And they were like, no, you guys are too young, you're not supposed to like do that. Like already we felt judged, and like we just decided to turn back, because if already when you enter through the clinic's gate someone is already judging you, how about when you get inside and meet the actual nurses? It's just going to be worse. So I mean, yeah, it is quite difficult for them to like get those services. Even at home, they'll just tell you don't play with boys. They don't become like specific about that, and when you ask, they tell you don't ask. We also didn't ask our parents, just do as we say. So
that's quite interesting, and I think it goes back to the rights element. And if the person you meet at the gate actually doesn't recognize that you have a right to accessing those services, I think it becomes quite challenging. And then Ms. Finn, in terms of these you know, the rights that are aligned to these services. How far have we come as a nation in terms of the actual movement, where we started seeing women lobbying for these rights, where we are now, and how much more work do we still have to do?
We have a lot of work to do. I think, and if we're still talking 10 to 14-year-old deliveries, we have a lot of work to do. And I think we shy away from calling things what they are. I always marvel at why we choose to say 10 to 14 deliveries instead of saying statutory rape, because it is statutory rape. So while there are achievements that we can celebrate in terms of the rise of women being on the agenda and being on everybody's, list of things to do, mainstream gender, make sure that we achieve gender equality, we are not yet there, because I think the political will is slow in getting things done. There is some political will we see in budgets being made available, but we have a lot of work to do. And it translates from, if you follow the ecological model where at the center is an individual who has responsibilities and they need to take those responsibilities. But they come from a family, and she's just said, if they were not taught, what do you transfer if you don't have that knowledge yourself? So you need to also make sure that we do some trainings with parents to get them to understand how to communicate about sexual reproductive health to their children. But you also have a society that has moral judgments everywhere, culture, entrenched in the culture, entrenched in the policies, even institutions, you are regulated, especially as a girl. So we problematize young women a lot. And I mean, if you look at when there's pregnancy, the boy continues as normal, because boys have all these privileges, have all these rights. But the society is so hard on you as a young woman. You are called names, you are discriminated against, you drop out of school because of all those things, and the boy continues. And that is why for me, this narrative where we say, but what about the boy, what about the boy? Yes, I understand we must bring the balance, but do we realize that girls still have a lot to catch up in terms with their boy counterparts because of how the society have always treated girls?
No, absolutely. And do you ladies think that there is an opportunity to bring in the boy child and young men to the fore so that they are part of the solution?
I think what Fina's just talked to is so important, that the girl has been left behind. But in order for that catch-up to happen, we need to have a whole restructuring of how we raise boys and how they get to realize that the rights of girls are actually human rights. So if I can compare it to the BEE conversation, for Black people to start accessing opportunities, they had to be white people that were enabling that.
Yeah.
As long as they didn't, and it was just a tick in the box exercise, you found Black colleagues who were frustrated, they just given an office in the workplace, but they're not bringing the value that they have into the workplace. So in order for us to really, really attain gender equality, we need to have those who are accessing and privileged to start acknowledging that we are privileged, and in this privilege, somebody else is being oppressed and suppressed, and that person is a human being with a human right, with talents that we need, and we need to have an environment that's enabling, whether it is politically, whether it is in corporates, whether it is in schools. It has got to be the buy-in of everybody for the equality conversation to really start making the traction. Fina talked a little bit, a little earlier around the political will is there, but why is the political will something that even our body language tells us it's there, but it's not quite there? It's because there hasn't been a real acknowledging of the fact that for us to harness the talent that we have in South Africa, we've got to include the 50% of the population, which is women and girls, that's been neglected.
No, absolutely. And Tabitha, maybe you can also just tell us a little bit about some of the programs that you run that are aimed at empowering the girl child and young women, and what is the take-up on some of those programs?
Okay, so one of the programs that we do at loveLife is called Living My Life. So basically what we do is that we educate young people on a range of positive life choices by focusing on what contributes to young people engaging in behaviors that put them at a high risk of contracting HIV, STIs, and unwanted pregnancy. And as you know, like, young women are carriers, right? So we teach them positive life choices, how to make positive choices, and we also look back at how we as young girls make bad positive choices, because I believe if you do not have self-identity, self-love, and self-responsibility, then you're bound to make like bad decisions. So we focus on like building their self-esteem, their self-confidence, so that in the near future they'll be able to make decisions that benefit them at the end. Yes.
Great stuff. Dr. Nid, if I can bring you in there maybe. I think what Tabitha is touching on is very important, because a lot of people think that the solution is almost like one-pronged. You have to tell young people around the dangers of unprotected sex and unwanted pregnancies, but she's touching on the elements of self-love. How important is that, and how important is it to make sure that whatever programs are developed actually incorporate that messaging of self-love and self-value?
Well, the point at which young people really start to make the decisions that can either make or break is during their adolescent years predominantly. And if you think of what's going on in the brain of a young person during that period, Professor Salim Karim Abdul had a very nice diagram that shows the brain of a young person during those years. So it would have love, it's got hate, it's got rebellion, it's got all sorts of things that they're trying to navigate. And in order to help them to navigate that, you need to help them to understand themselves, to understand even why today I love my mom, she's the most fantastic woman on the planet. And tomorrow it's like, Mom, leave me alone, you just irritate me, you know. To help them understand that it's part of the process that they need to work through. It's part of a process that they need to learn how to manage the emotions, so that when they're on an emotional high or an emotional low, whatever decisions they're making are decisions that have got longevity inside, rather than, my girlfriend's made me angry, so I'm going to rape her. You've messed up your whole life.
Yeah.
My girlfriend's made me angry, I'm going to stab her to death. We've just lost 2 lives by you making that decision. So it's very important for us to be, as part of how we're raising young people, as part of how we engage them, to show them those values that we expect them to espouse, to show them the love, the respect. I'm listening to you. What have you got to say? And really be present when they're talking to us. Give them that platform to engage with us, so that we can understand where they are and then help them to navigate that.
No, absolutely. And Dr. Tato, all these programs and mitigation methods, for lack of a better word, how involved are young people in driving the narrative and in the development of these programs? Because they are targeted at young people. What's their involvement? What's their contribution to the narrative?
Right. So I can even start it here. We're talking about young people. We have a young person. So the saying that you can't do anything for us without us. So what the Department of Health has really tried hard to do is to ensure that our interventions for young people always include young people. You look at our platforms, you look at consultative processes that we take. We always have our young people represented, ambassadors represented, and we ask. There's always, we're trying to embark on youth zones. We have already, I think, mentioned, all of us here, that a clinic may not necessarily be the first place a young person may want to go to for different reasons. And we now saying that, in facilities, let's sensitize, but let's also have a space for young people. This is a youth zone now. That was the kind of conception and birth of youth zones. And the question was, what would I think a youth zone is as compared to what a young person thinks a youth zone is? It's 2 very different, concepts. So those are, I think, the values that we have now tried to engage with, tried to work with, to try to ensure that, as we know, it's very easy for me to say, yes, don't have sex, I mean, I can think it's simple. Don't have sex, you won't get pregnant. But it's really not simple. That's why we have a young person, we have young people to say, again, sexual reproductive health and rights. Yes, we haven't forgotten. So, and again, as you say, rights go with responsibilities. So really, yes, we're trying to strengthen that, relationship with young people so that we don't dictate what we feel is what should be done, but we try to engage with the young person to say, this is what works now as compared to what may have worked, some time ago, and how do we move? Because really things have changed. The world is different now, and unless, as a mother of teenagers myself, I look at my children and I'm like, So yeah, we really try. The department is really trying hard to ensure that young people are coming in. We go to conferences, you always have young people. You go to big meetings where you have the department and our partners, you always have young people represented when we're talking about young people's engagements. So I think it's very important that we always engage and share and include young people in interventions and decisions that at the end of the day involve them.
Absolutely, and affect them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Ms. Fina, and I'm going to also touch on the other organizations as well. For a young person who's tuned into this platform and watching, what are the services that are actually available? So if I'm young, I'm not too sure where I need to go, who I need to speak to. What are some of the platforms that I can reach out to? Where can I actually go to access these services?
I wish you could have asked Dr. Tatu to outline what services are on offer in the youth zones, because I think it's important that young people know when they go to a clinic, this is what I can get. Because with information, as we said earlier, then you are empowered to ask and say, but I know that I'm supposed to get this here. Why is it not on offer? So we need to be able to say to young people, if you go to a youth zone, you should expect to find a friendly sister there who's going to give you information on contraceptives, on termination options that are available, because I think we shy away from listing those services. And the minute they are not a list that a young person can say, okay, I need that, we create that gap in terms of accessing, right? But I think there are organizations like Soul City, loveLife, where we have formations for young people, where we build movements for young people, because I think when we look at programs and we call them girl empowerment programs, for me, it should be the other way around. We should look at what is disempowering these young girls and deal with that in the system, that we find these things that disempower them. Then it will be easier for them to be empowered. But we give information and they still go to a system that doesn't provide. So what's the use of that information? So I think we need to turn things around and start looking at, we need to look at the system and say, these are the things that disempower young women. Lack of services is a disempowerment, because I'm not ready to have a baby. I'm ready to have sex, but I'm not ready to have a baby. So if I go to a clinic and somebody tells me you are too young to get a contraceptive method, you are disempowering me, because I'm making a decision for my future to say a baby will not be part of this picture right now, and you are saying no. And because I'm ready and I have a pressure of a boyfriend who's also ready or whatever, whether we are ready or not, but the action is going to happen. I go home without getting that contraceptive, I get pregnant. My future is already destroyed because, one, my education is affected. Even if the school's system says you can still come to school when you're pregnant, a lot of us, we know young people would not go because stigma, shame, teachers telling you, you were busy doing without, we know the language that they use, right? So we need to really deal with systemic issues that disempower and put a lot of effort there before we put effort on empowering these girls, because then it's like a useless effort. You have all this information, you know your rights, you are ready, but the system says no. So it becomes a barrier and you don't move forward.
No, absolutely. Dr. Tatu, do you want to add on to that?
I think in a way you did kind of like list a bit in terms of the services that we get in youth zones or within the youth zones. And I think what's critical is that we are expanding, and the plan is to ensure that all our 4,000 facilities have youth zones at the end of the term that we are looking at. But in terms of the services, in addition to the information that you get in terms of sexual reproductive health interventions, we are looking at, as we say, safe abortion, safe termination. We're looking at contraceptives. We're looking at HIV testing, treatment, management, STIs. When you talk contraceptives, we include condoms as well, and the information that goes with the multi. What you would say, what does a condom do? It's a contraceptive. It will protect you from pregnancy, from STIs, from that dual nature of the condom. And we talk about, in terms of information, empowering the young girl in terms of, again, gender-based violence. We talked about gender equalities or inequalities. How does a young person, deal with issues like that? So. As much as you're getting or dealing with sexual reproductive health, but you're also dealing with primary health care. So they shouldn't think that I can't go there because now I only have a headache. It's primary health care is part of it as well.
No, absolutely.
And sorry, if I could just add to that, I think another important component that's been added is the young people giving feedback on the service that they received. I think that is very, very important because that's the only way we can gauge whether the youth zones are working, whether the training that's been given to the healthcare service provider that they will meet there is working. Is them being able to say, I went to this place at such a time and the service is great, I'm never going back again, because then we know where we need to improve and we know where we've gotten it right.
No, absolutely. And then how do we bring the community at large to make sure that we don't have issues of shaming, issues of young people feeling embarrassed? How do we make sure that as much as government and its partners is trying its best and really committed to making sure that these services are available, how do we then bring community members on board to say, let's support our young people, let's not shame them, let's also just come on board and be a pillar of support for our young people?
Okay, so at a programmatic level at loveLife, we have got what we call community dialogues. Now, this is pre-COVID, when we could gather together, in the communities where we've got facilities that we call our youth centers. We used to have intergenerational dialogues, and we call them born-free dialogues. And it's basically a facilitated conversation between the young people in that community and the older generation, or their parents, really, not just an older parent, their parents in that community, to be able to engage on the issues that parents have got issues with and vice versa, and be able to get them to come to an understanding of where each is. And a second way that we also try to get those conversations going is through community radio stations. Because with the community radio stations, you break down the barrier that is sometimes created by you need to be there in person, or the conversation is going to be in English. We can talk to communities in their languages on the issues that are happening within that community at a point in time.
Absolutely. I think dialogue is always useful, especially if you can get all parties involved. And Rutabile, from a young person's perspective, what would you say are some of the barriers that young people come to you and say, this is what we are experiencing from a services perspective, but as well as the rights issue?
As a young person working with young people as well, is that when they want to access different prevention methods, say you're used to using new menstruate, and then when you go to the clinic, they tell you that prevention method is not available. Now you are supposed to use a different one, and our bodies are different, react differently to those prevention methods. And I go thinking about we sebedisang ha iyo, so tlameha hore o switche ko engwe e we sebedisang, and a pregnancy test tlo thola hore ha iyo. It's just go ba thata for bona, because ba bang ha bana tšhelete hore ba ye ko a private facility or by access prevention method isn't right for bona. So we are limited to the prevention methods. We only have the injection DDPLC only, arena body loop and all those things. Yeah.
Ms. Fina, if I can sort of bring you into this conversation, I think all of you have touched on the importance of making sure that these services are available, the importance of communities obviously being part of it. What are some of the consequences that as a nation we will face if we actually don't prioritize making these services available, highlighting the rights of young women and girls to reproductive sexual health services. What are some of those consequences that we'll face if we don't get this right?
I think the gap will keep widening. You'll see more boys prospering, girls being left behind. Because like we said, if I fall pregnant at school level, I will probably drop out, and the boy child will continue prospering. So my education is affected, and when my education is affected, my future is definitely affected. But also, disability that could come from complications of pregnancy when you are young. And Dr. Tatu can elaborate further on those, but there's immature death because you are forcing them to go to the backstreet abortions when they are not accessing the right service that is there at the clinic where you could actually, even be counseled and given support, to move forward with your future. So you could die prematurely as a young woman, your future is at stake. You could have disability as a result of childbirth, But also, I think the fiber of society is affected because, the more unequal we are as a society, the more you will see gender-based violence being the norm. The more you will see economies affected. I mean, right now with COVID, we know that with all the job losses, women bear the brunt. They are the most affected. So it's a cycle that will continue happening because we failed to make decisions at some point where we were very decisive about how to equalize between the genders and how to create opportunities between the genders, like equality of opportunities. It's not only equality of genders, but also equality of opportunities between the genders and making sure that young women occupy that space and hold those positions, without fear, creating that enabling environment for young women. We should stop judging them for how they dress. We should stop judging them for who they choose to be in relationships with. It's their choice, it's their right. We should be encouraging for them to take up these things because being young is fun, as much as it has its challenges. When you are denied the opportunities to have fun, you will be creative to create those opportunities, and sometimes then you find yourself in danger. So we should make it safe for them to explore and just enjoy being young people.
Absolutely.
And I think if I can add to that as well, I mean, we know that we're a country where the biggest burden of new HIV infections is among young women between 17 and 24. And the not prioritizing giving them youth-friendly services means that a young person that could have gone on PrEP, gone to a clinic, been advised by a sister and gone on PrEP so that this risk is minimized, doesn't. Then the one who is HIV positive, I think the stats do show us that young men and young people are the ones that are actually not getting onto treatment.
Yeah.
And for young men, we know you have to drag them by the horns to get them into a health facility. But young people, I really think it's related to how they've experienced healthcare facilities. And until I'm dying, I'd rather not go there, because if they're going to be pointing a finger for me when I want contraceptives, what happens when I have to go for an HIV test and put on ARVs? So the cost is really huge. If you think that as a country, we've got the biggest HIV treatment in the world, the only way we can start to stop that is to close the tap. And part of closing that tap is getting young people to be able to go to healthcare facilities and be treated with dignity and with respect. And, be affirmed for taking charge of their health instead of,
I think as you're speaking, I almost want to duplicate you ladies and then put you in those youth centers so that when they come there, they meet this kind of energy. Which leads me to my next question, and maybe Dr. Tatu, you can take this one. What would be the ideal healthcare service provider from a person perspective? So if a young person goes to these clinics, what kind of person should they be interacting with? What are some of the attributes that person needs to have?
She would probably have a better answer now. Because from where I'm sitting in my age, the thinking is very different. But my thinking, and where I'm sitting again, as somebody who is supposed to be managing these interventions, inclusive of young people,
Right.
what we would really like to see in a public health facility is compassion. You know, it's somebody who understands a lot more empathy, you know, listening, good listening skills, really trying to engage the young person rather than, you know, I said it before, not dictating to them that, no, you shouldn't be doing this, no, this is what you should be doing. It's better when it comes from the young person to say, this is what I'm trying to do. How can you help me to get there? So how can now I help you in order for you to help yourself as well?
Right.
So yeah, compassion, you know, transparency, empathy, and a lot more understanding and information. You know, we talked about the dialogue. We don't like just kind of like teach at that level. We talk. So it has to be a two-way. And I think in that way, then we are able to not just say, I'm going to give you a biomedical intervention per se, but we become inclusive of also kind of like talking about whatever social issues that this person may have, and structural. And then we continue with what we call combination interventions. So, yeah.
So engagement is very important.
Engagement is very important.
And Rutabile, for you obviously are part of the Live My Life program, that is a loveLife program. What impact? I know that obviously the program has impact on other young people, on your peers, because you share information and you engage with them. What kind of impact has being part of the program had on you personally?
Yeah, it has had like a huge impact in my life. It also built my self-confidence. It helped me to be a role model and to be an idea of myself that I want to be, not what the society tells me to be. And it gave me a lot of confidence to say, if I am able as a young person to stand in front of you and to give you advice, you should also be able to do the same thing to the ones who are not around whilst we are sharing this information. So it gave me a whole lot of confidence, because when you have like access to information and you have access to facts, you are able to have that confidence to give that information to someone else because you are certain about the information that you have. So it has like built my confidence in a whole lot of ways. Yes, and I know my rights and responsibilities.
That's great. Dr. Linda, listening to a young person talk about the kind of impact that a program that loveLife actually offers, how does that make you feel in terms of, you know, all the efforts that obviously the organization puts into making sure that young people have access to healthcare?
At a personal level, these young people are what keeps me going. The energy that they have. I mean, under normal circumstances, a young person sitting with mothers would be intimidated and so, I mean, I'm meeting Ritale for the first time today. And she's not been prepped that, okay, this is what she's been told, this is what the conversation will happen, like we've been briefed. And she's able to hold it on her own. That makes me so incredibly proud, because I always believe if we make the difference in the life of one person, there's a ripple effect. So I know that moving forward, every person that she comes into contact with is going to get something from her. And like she's saying, just being able to be part of a program where she is a peer educator and she can not only relating to her peers, but now she's seeing herself, oh my goodness, it's bigger than just me. There's other young people that are looking up to me. Yeah, it makes me think, okay, we can leave, and this country, this organization at an organizational level is in good hands.
That's great. And I think talking about the ripple effect, you know, every small action counts, especially when there is a bigger vision that a country or a nation or even on a global scale people are trying to achieve. And I'll start with you, Ms. Fina. From a Soul City Institute perspective, what are some of the small actions that you think the organization has taken that is sort of taken the movement forward?
I think for us, the decision to be overtly feminist has really shifted, you know, our focus, and has even made sure that we break the ground in terms of challenging the status quo, you know. So when we engage from a perspective of patriarchy is a system that needs to be dismantled, and this is how patriarchy is it's putting a barrier for all of us. And as a feminist organization that seeks social justice for young women, we want to make sure that we will hold each and every level of government accountable for the promises they made. I mean, we have a constitution, we have a Bill of Rights, enshrined in those are freedoms that have been guaranteed, but we know that women are not free, because I can't move at night without being raped. I can't move at night without being violated in some way or the other. So we want to always put like a checklist where we say, okay, government, here you are doing well, but have you seen that this area is still not being addressed? And I know right now GBV has become a serious topic in the country. It's a pandemic within the COVID pandemic. Linda mentioned that 50% of this nation, which is women, is left out. We find women having to beg, for space when they don't have to beg for space, because it's guaranteed, right? You are guaranteed freedom to choice, freedom to movement, and all those. So I think for us, the feminist agenda becomes critical, because then you are able to equalize when you say, let's put women first. Let's make sure that we address the gaps, the history, that put women at the back. Can we move them up and make sure that they are on par with their male counterparts? And then we can start looking at how we empower, and look at dismantling those that disempower.
No, absolutely. And then Dr. Tato, from a government perspective, what would you say are some of those small actions that has been taken?
So, sorry, take my mask off. Within the department, we have also tried to, I don't know, maybe I can talk a little bit about, access to information. While we still have our organizations, mainly we have our loveLife and our Soul City that are really our supporting, organizations in terms of access to information for young people, in terms of the interventions for young people, health in general, as our age, but also health in general. So we try to ensure that we bring services to the young people through the digital platform. And that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about Be Wise as well, which is really a health brand, but it is also supported immensely by, as I say, our other partner organizations. And just to mention a few, loveLife, Soul City, we have this RHI, we have WHO, and so on. So it's very important to ensure that we, as I was saying, in terms of self-care, bring services to the young people, ensure that they have that access to ensure that they make those informed decisions that we talked about before. The issue of knowledge being powerful. Knowledge is power, and it actually empowers you to make those informed decisions, because it's not like decisions are not made. She said something about sometimes we make bad decisions as young people. A lot of those are, aggravated by lack of information, because I don't really know what to do now that I'm in this situation. So as a department, we try to ensure that we access or we provide an enabling environment for young people to access information as well as services. So I think such platforms are very important. We know that young people like digital platforms. So it's very important that you try to get to them where you will be able to reach them.
Absolutely. Dr. Linda, just touching on what Dr. Tato has said around, loveLife as well as Soul City being critical partners, and then you obviously have the know-how because you're a youth brand and you speak to people. What kind of innovative methods does loveLife actually use to communicate with young people and to give young people this much needed information?
So I think one of the spaces that we had started to go into probably around 2015 was really the digital space. So we started to use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and it served us well during this lockdown period because we were able to continue doing those programs via those social media networks. Now, one of the things that loveLife has is a psychosocial contact center. And so young people send an SMS to 083-323-1023 and somebody calls them back. What we found with the social media space is that a lot of the questions are now being inboxed into our pages. So we're now having to make sure that there's diligence in monitoring what's happening on the social media, in the direct messaging, so that whatever psychosocial related issues are being DM'd to us, we can address them. Sometimes there's conversation again on those platforms.
That's great, because I think you do need to innovate, you do need to look at what's current and in which direction are young people moving. I just want to sort of bring our discussion to a very sad close, because it's been a very exciting and interesting discussion. But before I do that, I'm just going to ask each member of the panel to just give their final thoughts on this topic, but also to just leave young women out there who are watching some kind of a message. It is Women's Month, a celebratory message perhaps, and just your last thoughts and just a little message to young women and young people who are actually watching us.
Don't you want to start with the young woman?
I don't know. It's so natural for me to my left is almost like my natural go-to. Ritavile?
Okay, I believe we should have more of these conversations wherein we'd have information about our sexual and reproductive rights. We need to have more of those information. And what I would like to say to the young women out there is that continue breaking boundaries. Don't let anyone make you feel inferior. Don't either do what your heart desires and go for your dreams, chase your dreams, and don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it, because you can.
Lovely.
Well, I'm feeling like such a proud mother here. I think you can all see kind of thing. Before I give the closing message, I just think there's one small step thing that we're doing as loveLife that I'd really like to talk to. I love what Fina said about Soul City being a proudly feminist organization. Now, let me educate people who think feminism is burning your bras and that kind of thing. It's not. Mm-hmm. It's making sure that there's equal opportunities in the educational space, in the political space, in the economic space for women. And as loveLife, one of the things that we started to do is to try to dismantle patriarchy by having a program that's focused on boys and young men. Mm. And that's trying to do it differently from the current crop that we're having to fight with to find our space where they are. So that's really one of the small things that we're doing. It's a program that we don't have funding for, but we said we cannot wait for somebody to say, here's money, go and do a program for boys and young men. Because I truly believe if we can get it right with the boys and young men, we don't need to be fighting for our space, because they will have been raised from day one to recognize that I'm one half of what makes up humanity on the planet. We've got girls, we've got boys. They're human beings. That's the fundamental thing about them, is that they're human beings and we need to respect them. And not just girls and around girls, even those with different sexual orientations, to be able to be safe, because we've raised a different crop of young person in the boy child. So that's my absolute passion, that if we can just get it right with the boys and with the young men, we're gonna have we're not gonna have to shut down the country, because we're just tired and we're having to say, my body is not a crime scene, because they will know that nobody's body is a crime scene. And not only will we have a safe environment for girls and young women, we'll have a safe environment for everybody. Because remember, they're also killing themselves and they're killing each other. So if we can get all those issues that are happening with boys and young men right, we'll fall off the radar of be one of the countries with the highest rates of violence, including gender-based violence. Absolutely. And then my closing remarks for my daughters, and I don't mean this in a demeaning manner, I mean it because, I'm a mother and I love young girls. I want to challenge you to identify one woman that you really, really admire and ask her to be your mentor, your go-to person, your source of information. Because, we think mentoring is for the workplace, but mentoring is for day-to-day life. And I can share with you that I've got a mentor that when I feel like, I pick up the phone and I say, Auntie Gail, we need to talk. So find a mentor, your safe person that you can go to and share with the things that you feel nobody will understand. There is one person. And I want you to know that we see you, we care for you, we're fighting for you, and we're here for you.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Dr. Tato?
Right, that was powerful.
Yeah.
The both of you. It really was. I'm not even really sure what to add on, but I can just say, yeah, as you have said. So basically, to the young people, to the young girl, to the young woman out there, please continue to be strong. You are strong. You can be anything you aspire to be. She has already said, don't ever let anybody tell you otherwise. And as the Department of Health, please continue to reach out. Continue to reach out to us. Tell us what you need. Help us to help you, because we will not get this right without you. And we are there to ensure that all, what young people are trying to get to, all the healthcare services, emotional, social, medical, everything that the Department of Health is there to actually allow. We need you to assist us, to point us in the right direction so that we get there, and join us to actually shape the youth of today to be the leaders of tomorrow.
Absolutely. Ms. Vina?
I think, so let me tell a short history about myself. So I became a mother at age 19, and of course I went through the most, from church, from home, but I refused to allow that narrative to define who this girl is, because I had a plan for my life. Yes, a child came, unplanned, but I still knew where I wanted to reach, because remember, it's a process, it's not a destination.
Yeah.
So I went through the processes of life, and I'm proud to say, even as a teen mother, I'm now a CEO of a big organization, because I refused to allow the narrative that says, you won't make it, look at you, I refused, and I attained my education as I had planned. I still plan to study further, because you can never really say I've done it all. So this is me encouraging young women that you might find yourself in the same position as me, but who says it's the end? It's only you who can agree as they say it to you and say, I'm defeated. But if you say, no ways, I'm coming back and I'm going to make sure that this girl defines where they want to be. My new favorite song is Beyonce's song, They'll Never Take My Power. Because that power is mine, and I refuse to give it to anyone. I refuse for anyone to take that power. So young women, we have the power, and we should refuse to give it away.
Lovely. Stunning.
Another amen there.
A lot of amens. A lot of amens. And I think it's always great when you actually hear a great story that also then motivates and inspires other people, because there is a great power, I think, in storytelling. Because if one person can do it, so can you. What an enlightening conversation we've had with all of you ladies. I would like to really thank you for not only bringing yourselves and sharing parts of yourselves, but giving young people much needed information around the very valuable programs that the various organizations that you represent actually offer to young people. To Retabile, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and representing the young people of South Africa. Dr. Linda, for actually being our host and a great partner to the Department of Health and running these amazing programs. I look forward to hearing more about these programs. Dr. Tato, for supporting the likes of loveLife and Soul City and bringing them on board and rallying behind them, showcasing that there is great power in collaboration. And Ms. Fina, for just being such a light to the conversation, sharing some of your personal stories. And we hope that the three organizations will continue working together and making sure that come 2030, we can at least say we have had an impact and we have done something towards reaching this goal of ours. Thank you.